Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are on the second book of the Oz series, The Marvelous Land of Oz. And this book is the first of basically every book in the Oz series, which is presaged by L. Frank Baum's perplexed-sounding author's notes / letters to his readers, in which he is stunned and slightly baffled that people keep wanting more. In this particular case, it's the first one, and he is startled and flattered that all of these children, especially little girls, want more stories of Oz, that they're all asking him for more tales of the Tin Woodsman and the Land of Oz overall. And he just sounds completely baffled that anybody wants it. But in the end, he wrote this book, which he dedicates following that to those excellent good fellows and comedians, David C. Montgomery and Frank A. Stone, whose clever personations of the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow have delighted thousands of children throughout the land. This book is gratefully dedicated by the author because apparently there was a Wizard of Oz stage play before there was a Wizard of Oz movie in the 30s. So, The Marvelous Land of Oz. This book has no Dorothy in it. And we will get to the return of Dorothy in the next book, but this sequel, The Marvelous Land of Oz, has a couple of interesting things, and I'm going to mention, to start with, the film sequel to The Wizard of Oz, Return to Oz, because that book is a mashup of The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz, that basically takes both of those, mashes them together, and frames them with the notion that Dorothy has been sent to a sanitarium because she was talking crazy. Return to Oz is a frequently horrifying film that has shocked and sometimes appalled its viewers, and not one that I personally appreciate, mostly because I am a very, very big fan of the Oz series, which makes it very, very clear from the first book onward that Oz is a real place. And it's not just because you have this book, The Marvelous Land of Oz, which exists completely separate from any interaction with the outside world, but the way that Dorothy bops back and forth between Oz and Kansas with such regularity during the series, in ways that cannot be explained by, took a severe head injury, makes it very, very clear that Oz is, within the context of this constructed world, a real place. But let's get back to the actual book. The Marvelous Land of Oz starts with a boy named Tip. And Tip has been raised by a witch named Mombi, and it's left very, very general, very, very loose at the start of the book why he's with her. She's not his mother. She's just somebody who wound up with him and is raising him. And she is not a very nice person. And after Tip's start of the book, where he decides to bring a scarecrow-like figure called Jack Pumpkinhead, which is basically a jointed wooden figure with a pumpkin for a head, and he's brought him to life. He's brought Jack Pumpkinhead to life with a powder of life that the witch Mombi had traded for in the mountains. He decides to run away because Mombi has said, "I'm going to turn you into a statue and use you as a decoration. I am done with dealing with you. As of right now, you're just going to be standing in the garden forever." And Tip decides he doesn't want this because, he's not an idiot, and decides to run away. In the process, he brings to life also a wooden sawhorse, which then acts as a primary means of transportation for Jack Pumpkinhead, who was not originally intended to be an actual living being, but was just meant to be sort of a thing to scare Mombi. And so he was eminently well put together for something that you can pose, but he wasn't actually designed to get around under his own steam. So he's extremely awkward and has a great deal of trouble moving. And upon discovering that Tip has brought him to life, he promptly declares that Tip must be his father. So for the rest of the book, he calls Tip Father and Father Dear, and Tip does his best within the limitations of somebody who's probably about 10 years old to try to basically, handle Jack, who doesn't know all that much. Tip is periodically unfair, but it's sort of an unfairness that is understandable given that, as I said, he's 10, maybe 12 years old. So they set off for the Emerald City, figuring that they can find their fortune, or at least have a particular destination, and they begin to have various adventures on the way, meeting various people. And at that point, this book settles into what has become since the first book, and continues all the way through, to be the standard formula of the Oz books, and that is, this book is about the adventures on the way, not the actual objectives of the people. That the objective is usually gained really quite easily in the end. It's just the process of getting to it. Like, this isn't like the process of, we need to gather our allies in order to defeat the bad guy. This isn't, I need to train in order to achieve my goal of becoming a knight. This is, we're getting from point A to point B because at point B is where our thing is, so stuff happens on the way. And that's really the charm of these books. They're travelogues. And I said it last time, and I will probably keep saying it over and over again. That's what makes these books so delightful, is it's just an opportunity to wander around in the land of Oz and see stuff, to learn more about the Munchkins and the Gillikins, to learn more about the Winkies and the cultures and peoples of this place. As they're on their way, they get separated eventually, and because the Sawhorse, being an artificial creature, can run very, very fast and run forever, and so he and Jack Pumpkinhead wind up leaving Tip very, very far behind when Tip foolishly tells him to giddy up, and he does, and runs as fast as he can right up to the Emerald City, where Jack Pumpkinhead and the Sawhorse meet the Scarecrow and get to talking. And there is a ridiculous scene, which thankfully doesn't last too long, of Jack Pumpkinhead insisting that they can't understand each other because the Emerald City is in a different country from the land of the Munchkins, and thus a translator, Jellia Jam, is called upon, and Jellia informs them eventually that you don't need a translator because you are in fact speaking the language, as everyone in Oz does. And Jack is spoken to quite sternly to stop pretending to think that you know anything, because you clearly don't. Yeah. It's a bit of a conceptual humor scene, and it's a little bit of a strain, but those kinds of scenes can be, unless handled very, very well. In the meantime, Tip runs across General Ginger, spelled Jinjur, who is a young woman who is tired of doing girl things like washing dishes and so on, and has formed an army of other young women, all of them armed with knitting needles, with the intention of taking over the Emerald City, and she decides she's going to become queen and have access to the treasury and do whatever she wants with all of the, jewels and gold therein. And so these young women come and take over the city because the army of Oz consists basically of one man who is very easily intimidated by all of, these hundreds of girls with knitting needles. And they take over the Emerald City and drive out the Scarecrow, who has been ruling since the wizard left. And Tip and the Scarecrow and Sawhorse and Jack Pumpkinhead go on the lam south to the kingdom of the Winkies, where the Tin Woodsman, Nick Chopper, has styled himself Emperor of the Winkies because he just likes being an emperor. And they have to travel various places, come back with him. They get into the Emerald City, and then things happen and they have to escape, and they make a flying creature out of strapping together various things and then using the last of the magic powder of life to bring it to life, but they don't have enough, so its legs don't work, and it is extremely cranky with all of them because the Gump's head, whatever a Gump is, but a Gump appears to be something vaguely like a moose and is deeply discomfited at having the last thing it remembers was being a moose, and now it is a moose head strapped onto two sofas with some palm leaves tied on to act as wings. He's very distressed by this. Understandably, really. And so they go back and forth and find a highly magnified insect that travels with them and makes puns, and when they get back, having collected Glinda the Good along the way, it is revealed that Tip is actually a girl, that the Princess Ozma, who was the rightful ruler of Oz, was kidnapped when her family was killed many, many years ago, handed over to the Witch Mombi, who promptly transformed her into a boy, and Tip says, "Wait, what? But, I don't want to be a princess. I want to have adventures and stuff." "What?" But they talk him around and he turns into a girl, and for the rest of the series seems perfectly content that way. And I'm not going to talk any more about any implications of that because I try to avoid anything remotely controversial on this channel, but you can't not mention the fact that the protagonist of this book, Tip, abruptly turns into a girl at the end and is the titular character of the next book. So it's the whole thing is very, very strange. But that's a fundamental of the Oz books, and I think it's something that bears repeating again and again with these books, is they are so very strange. They're these remarkable flights of fancy into this fantasy land with weird characters, weird concepts, weird animals that are that are, metaphorically speaking, glued together bits of other animals. They're inanimate objects that have come to life and have their own opinions about everything. That there are animals that speak and have their own strange personal opinions about things, and there's this wonderful quality even of our protagonists to be kind of wrong, but they're very, very young, and it's implied in the book that as they get older they will learn better, but they're 10 years old, 12 years old, and when you're 10 and 12 there are things you don't know and things that you say because you don't know any better. And so this book, this second entry in the series, is just that next step into just the supreme oddness, the delightful, endless oddness of the Oz books. And that is everything, and I will see you all next week when we get Dorothy back. So, thanks everybody, and see you all next week.